We have arrived at the end of part 1, ladies and gentlemen. Here is a supercut of all the chapter recaps I've done so far, except for the flashback chapter. I'm going to do a supercut of just Shallan's flashbacks at the end of the book, so I'm not including those in these supercuts for each part of the book. But anyway, part 1, let me know what you think. Just a few days after the events of chapter 48 in the Way of Kings, Shallan and Jasnah are traveling by boat. Shallan is sitting on the deck, sketching Shadesmar when she notices a strange pattern overlaying the page. She tries to touch it and it slides off onto the deck and starts skittering all around. It really freaks her out. Jasnah comes on deck and starts teaching her about Shadesmar. She says it's also called the cognitive realm, or the place of the mind, and it's basically like another dimension. It was created by human thought, but shaped by Spren. She explains that Spren are basically like little pieces of Shadesmar that have leaked into the human world because of the attention that humans have given them. She thinks that Shallan was actually led to Jasnah by Spren, which are the strange creatures that Shallan keeps seeing. She thinks that the Spren can sense that something major is happening in the world, and they're reaching out to humans because they're kind of freaked out about it. Jasnah has also started the process of having Shallan be betrothed to her cousin, Adal, which, if it works out, will save her family. At the end of the Way of Kings, Dalinar gave Kaladin 2 assignments. He said he wanted him to lead a team of bodyguards made up of Bridge 4 for the royal family, and he also wanted him to train all of the other bridgemen from Sadeas's camp as soldiers in Dalinar's army. So Kaladin goes out with Moash, Teft, and Scar. They start inspecting these troops, and they're not very impressive, but they start to make plans on how to train them. The other guys start expressing some doubts about Dalinar, but Kaladin knows that Syl trusts Dalinar, and so he decides to follow her lead, and he says, no, we're going to protect this guy at all costs. This is our job. The former bridgemen from Bridge 4 go and get tattoos to cover over their slave brands, and to Kaladin's surprise, they get additional tattoos indicating that they're from Bridge 4, and even the guys that didn't have slave brands decide to get the Bridge 4 tattoos. So Kaladin tries to get the Bridge 4 tattoo as well, but it won't stay in his skin. The Stormlight healing abilities just leaks out of his skin. It doesn't work. Then the guys get their new uniforms, but they tear off the old Cobalt Guard badges, and they say, no, we're Bridge 4. Shallan is in her room on the boat, and she sees that weird pattern again on the wall. So she's able to actually capture a memory of it this time. So she starts sketching it in her book, and it rises off the page, starts sliding around. She freaks out, runs to get Jasnah, who's actually right outside the door already, and Jasnah's holding like a little person in the palm of her hand, made out of inky blackness. The person fades as soon as Shallan shows up. Jasnah comes into the room, starts explaining things to Shallan. She says, what you're seeing is a lie, Spren, but they refer to themselves as cryptics, and they're sort of like the ruling class of Shadesmar. The ancient Knights Radiant were able to bond with these Spren in order to gain special powers called surges. Each order of the Knights Radiant had access to 2 separate surges. Now, Jasnah is very clear that we are not Knights Radiant. We have access to these Spren, things are happening, but we're not Knights Radiant. And although they have access to 2 separate types of Spren, they do have an overlapping surge, which is soul casting. Jasnah then tells Shallan, you better start studying this cryptic and figure out what your other surge is. Dalinar is having a vision during a high storm. He seems to be in the Pure Lake with a bunch of soldiers. They meet up with a Knight Radiant and they start searching the water for something. He's told that they're looking for a Spren that has been touched by Sia Anat and is not behaving the way it should. Pretty soon Dalinar sees a Spren in the shape of a face with red eyes in the water. It starts swimming around and the men start chasing it, but then he sees a larger shadowy Spren that dives down into the rocks. All the other men run away. They're freaking out. Dalinar doesn't know what the heck is going on, and then this enormous creature made out of stone bursts out of the water. It breaks out of the ground underneath the water. The men call it a thunderclast, and the Knight Radiant starts fighting with it. While that happens, the voice of the Almighty, who is dead, starts talking to Dalinar and tells him that in order to defeat Odium, he needs to refound the Knights Radiant, that they were originally created in order to help men during the desolations and help them rebuild after. Pretty soon, he wakes up from the vision and he sees written on the wall, 62 days, death comes after. Dalinar and King Elhokar issue a proclamation that all future plateau assaults will have to be done by 2 high princes working together, and any gem hearts they win will become property of the king for him to distribute as he sees fit. Kaladin and Bridge 4 warned that the other high princes are not going to like this. So we cut to Sadeas. He's admiring his new shard blade that Dalinar gave him at the end of the Way of Kings, but he's just not satisfied somehow. His wife walks in and we learn that she runs an advanced network of spies in the war camps, and they have lots of plans to actually increase the other high princes' discontent and hopefully fracture fracture the kingdom so that Sadeas can swoop in and take control. If that doesn't work, they're planning on having Dalinar assassinated. Cut back to Kaladin, the king, Dalinar, other high officials. They're discussing how the other high princes have reacted to this proclamation, and it is not good. It's causing problems. So Kaladin recommends they try to disarm the other high princes. Since they can't take away their armies, Dalinar approves Adolin to start engaging in official duels of honor to take away their blades and their plate. After that, Dalinar announces that he's planning on refounding the Knights Radiant, and everyone loses their mind. Shallan is still on that boat, and she has started talking with that Spren that she calls Pattern. His earliest memory is of Shallan sitting surrounded by plants, so she starts thinking about this childhood memory of hers of sitting in the gardens on her father's estate, but then something about it freaks her out, and she pushes that memory away. One of the sailors comes over and he says, "I swear the deck just turned green over here. What's going on?" And Shallan realizes that the spheres that she had are now done. So she goes with Jasnah, and Jasnah says, "It sounds like you drained those spheres accessing another surge, using up the stormlight there." So she tells her about this surge called Illumination. It deals with manipulating light and stuff like that. She also tells her that historically, before each desolation, there were people like Shallan who would discover new magical abilities, and those people went on to be the Knights Radiant. So she says, since Shallan has access to these surges, it's probably a sign that a desolation is coming. Shallan says, "We need to warn everybody." And Yasna's like, "Yeah, that's why we're going to the Shattered Plains, because my family's there. They're the only ones who are going to believe me. And by the way, we're also looking for a secret gate to the legendary city of Uruthiru." Shallan wakes up on the boat to the sound of shouting and the smell of smoke. So she opens her door and she witnesses 3 men murder Jasnah in the hallway. She screams and they notice her, so she rushes back into her room. They're trying to break down the door to get at her. Pattern is telling her something about a sword, telling her to remember, and she's like, "No." So Pattern helps her use some stormlight to create a sort of vaguely humanoid shape. She doesn't really do it intentionally, it just kind of comes out. When the men break down the door, the shape rushes past them. They think it's Shallan, so they chase after it, leaving her alone in the room. She starts to think that the best thing she can do for the other people on the boat is to create some chaos in order for them to be able to escape, so she decides to sink the ship. She has Pattern take her to Shadesmar, which is a little bit different than it was last time she visited there, and she communicates with a little bead that represents the boat. The boat doesn't want to change, but eventually she's able to convince it to not be a boat anymore. She comes back to the real world. She watches the ceiling and the walls and the floor melt away into water, and she sinks into the freezing depths. Dalinar is on a joint plateau assault with High Prince Aladar. Now, Dalinar does not enjoy these plateau assaults anymore. He used to, but now he sees them as a frivolous waste of resources and lives. So he's kind of taking a step back and letting Adolin run the show while he talks to Aladar. Now, Aladar's not happy to be there either. He did comply, he showed up, but he does not like this new system. He doesn't want to share his winnings or any of that stuff. Dalinar tells him, "Too bad, you comply or we punish you." And he even goes so far as to imply that if the High Princes don't comply, he implies that if they don't comply, they might resort to capital punishment. Aladar's shocked by this, but Dalinar tells him, "Hey, I'm here to unite this kingdom no matter what." And Aladar reminds him, "Your brother did not unite this kingdom with fancy speeches. He did it by bloodshed." Anyway, Dalinar gives him some good tactical advice, helps win the battle, but Aladar tells him, "Hey, I'm still not going to support you. The other High Princes would kill me." Kaladin is down in the chasms with some of the men, and he spends pretty much the whole chapter talking to Syl. She says that she's been seeing strange spren like red lightning, and that something dangerous is coming. Kaladin asks her if there are others like him, and she gets very sullen. He's like, "Are you going to lie to me?" And then she's like, "What do you think I am, a cryptic?" And then she admits that she doesn't know what a cryptic is. So Syl tells Kaladin that she came from a place with lots of spren in it and living lights in the air. It was dangerous for her to come here, and she risked death if she wasn't able to find a mind to bond with like she did with Kaladin. She also tells him that there are other spren in the world trying to reclaim what was lost, but she's the only honor spren, and she came here in defiance of the Stormfather, the giant face in the sky during high storms. She also tells Kaladin that what they can do together is very important, and that Kaladin needs to become what Dalinar Kholin is searching for. Kaladin's very hesitant, but then Syl gets him to promise that he will try to become a Knight Radiant. Shallan washes up on the shore somewhere in the Frostlands, and she spends hours searching for other survivors of the shipwreck with no luck. She does find a waterproof trunk that washed up on the shore, and it's full of Jasnah's life's work, her notebooks and journals and all that stuff, so that's great. Shallan is worried about how she's going to survive out here because it's freezing cold, she has no food. She gathers up some sticks, wants to make a fire, but she doesn't know how to do that, so she goes into Shadesmar to try to soulcast a fire. She has a really one-sided conversation with a stick, and the stick does not want to stop being a stick, so that doesn't really work out. She gives up on that idea. She's afraid to fall asleep because she thinks she might freeze to death, so she starts walking and walking and walking. She sees a light off in the distance, she goes toward it, and she stumbles into a camp, some people sitting around a fire, and she falls asleep. In the morning, she learns that these people are slavers, but don't worry, they're not interested in enslaving her. They are not going to the Shattered Plains, but Shallan does her best to act like Jasnah and be very commanding, and gets them to agree to take her there. Kaladin, Syl, Rock, and Lopen are experimenting with Stormlight. Kaladin's getting a lot better at consciously controlling the Stormlight. He's sticking rocks to the wall. He sticks Lopen to the wall. They decide that he needs to practice actually interacting with other people, so they do a mock fight. He's able to defeat them, but it's kind of hard for him, and he realizes he needs more practice. He's able to experiment drawing the Stormlight back into his body and just different abilities, so it's kind of cool. Rock is quite a fighter, although he refuses to engage in any real combat. Something to do with his culture and the fact that he's a third-born son. Anyway, Tef shows up. He and Kaladin talk about the possibility of refounding the Knights Radiant, and they agree that pretty much everybody's going to hate this idea, mostly because of this general consensus in the society that the Knights Radiant betrayed mankind in ages past. Kaladin leads his men out of the chasms, and he arrives in the camp to find out that High Lord Amaram has just arrived at the Shattered Plains, and he's got a shiny new shard blade.